Really grateful to have Chris Nicol here as our speaker to unpack the Gartner's 3 C's approach to identity first security, and really looking forward to what he's got to say. Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself while we wait for people to roll in?
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Chris Nicol. I am one of Sphere's security strategists. I've got almost 2 decades of IT experience, heavy experience in the PAM industry. And today I want to discuss Gartner's approach to identity first security. Are we good to get started, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. We're so glad to have you here and really looking forward to it. All yours.
All right. So first off, what are Gartner's 3 C's and what do they mean? The first one is consistent, something that is constant, it's reliable, or it's done on a regular basis. Next is context aware. We need to understand how or where an object is being used. That gives us the context for that identity. And then the last one is continuous. And continuous just means uninterrupted or unending. Essentially, we need to do the first 2 tasks all the time. So how does this approach apply to identity? Traditionally, the security perimeter was focused around firewalls, and more recently, cloud environments, the end of your perimeter. We're now seeing it needs to start with identities. One of the core issues is poor identity management, where identities have far more permissions than they should have, and in some cases they don't have enough. This is obviously a big problem, and it can't be solved without some sort of software platform. According to the IDSA in an article from 2022, 84% of enterprises have experienced some sort of identity-related breach. I've included some examples on ways that we can improve our security posture that align with this approach. The first one is practicing the principle of least privilege. This is one instance where giving the bare minimum is acceptable and it's encouraged. We only want to give identities the permissions that they need to do their jobs, and that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Next off, we want to remove standing access. This is a newer idea, and it definitely requires some sort of third-party software to effectively complete it. The idea here is to cut back on the number of admin accounts across your environment and only activate them when they're needed to complete some sort of function. This drastically decreases your attack surface. The last example that I have is enforcing just-in-time access. This goes along with removing standing access and only providing access when and where it's needed. So the first C is consistency. Basically, we need to know, we don't know what we don't know. So first we need to figure out what our identity state is. And we do that by performing a discovery to find all of the identities and then work on protecting them. Now, identities can change, roles change with people coming and going and moving throughout the company. We need to have a consistent visibility on those identities and to best understand how they're being used and what status they're in. Likewise, we should have a similar understanding for machine identities. When they are added, when they're removed, and so on. Finally, we must have consistent awareness of what identities exist, how to maintain them, who owns them. We should also test any mechanisms, processes, or policies that we're using during our identity lifecycle. Any questions so far?
Do you feel like there's some sort of blocker between getting through these? Because I feel like these are kind of like stages, right? So you have to move through each one to get to the next. how do you feel companies are doing from getting from step one to step two?
So it really depends on the maturity of that company, I would say. Um, and yeah, it does feel like it's a staged type of approach. Um, I would say that like any kind of staged approach, you don't want to boil the ocean, but you also don't want to drag your feet. So you want to move through as quickly as you can. Obviously, you want to attack the low-hanging fruit first. That's the easy, quick wins. And that would be what I would recommend to people, is to focus on getting quick wins. It's better to have at least part of your environment secure than focusing on the entire thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So we will continue on with the second C of context aware. It's important to understand the context of our identities and how they're being used. So what account types they have access to, whether or not they actually need the access that they have. These identities can exist within data centers, hosting platforms or appliances, infrastructure servers, storage devices, network devices, switches, routers, firewalls, cloud environments like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, and many more areas. So we need to understand what endpoints these identities should be operating from, how they normally behave, and what they normally connect to or access, and the location and times of their normal operations. That's an important one too. Understanding these things, they're going to help us better secure these identities and pinpoint anomalies. The third C is continuous. So this is the final principle, and it's all about practicing endless consistency and contextual awareness to the point of it becoming normal, or habitual in the way that you conduct identity security. Our ever-growing cybersecurity industry has provided plenty of viable options in the market today that can help us accomplish this undertaking. I would urge anyone attempting to do this to improve their security posture by adopting this approach, to not try to do this manually. It'll be painfully slow, and it's going to take far longer than you would actually think. So what I would recommend is look for a leader in the identity hygiene space that practices this approach to identity security, preferably one with a platform that has an identity or has an intelligent discovery, automated remediation, and ongoing prevention. Any other questions?
When you say identity hygiene, I feel like I've heard identity security, I hear like security hygiene, but I really don't ever hear identity hygiene. How do you define that so that you would know where to even start looking for a platform or a provider that could help you?
Right. So identity hygiene it's a newer concept. You can Google identity hygiene and you will get results. But I would say the idea behind identity hygiene is really just implementing the principle of least privilege. It's about keeping your environment clean. So it's not just focused necessarily around privileged access or identity, but it's also focused around Active Directory, and or file share access, just access to your data, all of that stuff. It needs to be clean. It needs to be, and when I say clean, I mean, again, least privilege, only giving people access to stuff that they should have access to.
Awesome. Thank you. That's really helpful. So if I was trying to explain to my leadership that we kind of needed to make these changes and I felt like I didn't know where to start, I obviously probably wouldn't want to start recommending platforms until I could explain to them just in terms that resonate with them what needs to happen. How would you recommend that I approach that?
Yeah. Earlier I said you don't know what you don't know, and it's really true. I think that a lot of people, until they actually see it, they have a misconception of where they might be at from a security standpoint until they can actually see it. So if you're not very far along in your identity or PAM maturity model, then I would say it should be a fairly easy sell. But I would definitely start with an identity hygiene platform that can kind of reveal all of that stuff for you. Like I said before, there's options out there. If anything, you can do a POC with one of these options, and that in itself should be pretty revealing. Now, if you're further along in your maturity and you're just, you want to make sure that you have things buttoned up, that's another great opportunity to partner with an identity hygiene leader and get a platform in there, and they'll be able to scan the environment and figure out what you might be missing. So
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like that makes sense. And I think too is kind of having a benchmark of understanding just at a high level of where we are would be really helpful too, and kind of trying to get a message that resonates with leadership. Is there anything, are there any resources that you know of that might help get just some basic numbers out there that most leaders, I feel like, only speak in numbers, whether it's dollars or
yeah.
something that makes sense? Is there anywhere that you know of that has that type of help?
Yeah, actually, I've been involved in building an ROI calculator here at Sphere, and we have one for people to use. It's web-based. You just plug in some different numbers that's relevant to your company, and it will spit out an estimate. Keep in mind, it is an estimate of what not securing it might be costing you in audits or breaches and things like that. But it also has the numbers of what it might cost to secure your accounts for the first year or so. So
Awesome.